Evening, gentlemen. Tonight we have another major game early on in Alekhine's career, this time from the St. Petersburg Open in April-May 1914. In fact, this was one of his last major games for a few years because of the advent of World War I. He was even captured and interned by the Germans in late 1914. When he was freed, he spent time doing simultaneous exhibitions in Russia to raise money to free his comrades. So that being said, in this tournament he came third behind Lasker and Capablanca, the current and soon-to-be world champion. And in this game he's playing with the black pieces against Rubinstein, who was actually a very strong player in his time, a potential world championship challenger for the title against Lasker, but the deal fell through because of financial trouble. Rubinstein was a very strong player in his own right, in fact a potential world championship challenger in the early 1900s against Lasker, but the match never happened because of financial disagreement.
In all likelihood, Alekhine took the opportunity of this St. Petersburg tournament to coin this St. Petersburg variation of the Nimzo-Indian, which is given by b6. This Nimzo-Indian arises from the hyper-modern school of thought, where black is aiming his pieces at the center from afar and not directly controlling it. This approach was somewhat controversial to the established school of thought at the time, but had already seen use by Nimzowitsch and the likes. Rubinstein opted for the most aggressive line here, in grabbing as much central space as possible with f3, so with a very blatant threat of playing e4 and try to push Alekhine off the board, to which Alekhine felt obligated to respond very directly by placing his own pawns in the center. So after a3 inviting black to further build his white center, Alekhine decided to play d5. Interestingly, Stockfish suggests knight c6, after knight e2, bishop a6 with hyper-modern style pressure on the center from afar, and this appears to equalize quite fast.
Play continues with normal developing moves on both sides. Both castle and knight bd7. Now slightly more accurate here according to Stockfish would have been d takes c4, after which bishop takes c4 and knight c6 is a slight improvement. Nevertheless, knight bd7 is a good move. Knight g3, queen c7, c takes, and now e4, white makes a play for the center.
Now e4 turns out to have been an error from Rubinstein. It was possible to be less committal than simply play something like queen e2, after which a sample line involves some further development, and Alekhine would likely have increased his pressure along the e-file. But it's still a bit of a game. However, after e4, Alekhine pounces on the opportunity to execute this queen infiltration, which is already highly unpleasant, forking rook and pawn, pretty much forcing this reply. And after taking on e4 and the very precise bishop a6, which is again forcing this reply, and black has managed to win a pawn.
So in this position, Master Rubinstein could of course go for knight takes e4 to avoid the obvious knight f2 fork. That being said, looking at knight takes e4, the Stockfish line given is, say, queen takes e4, and then after bishop d3, queen h4, queen e1, queen takes d4, white has dropped another pawn and can pretty much resign here. So instead, Master Rubinstein tries to stir up some trouble on the king side. We see knight f5, knight f2, rook takes, queen g4. Got some potential threats here, obviously mate, but also discoveries here. And so that pretty much forces the g6 weakness out of black. Play continues rook f1 with tempo, eyeing the f-file. After queen b2, we see that white carries out his final mistake.
So now Rubinstein had the opportunity to play the simple knight e7 check, after which he gains a second piece for his rook, and stands only a little worse. The fun clownfish line here is bishop c8, just disconnecting the black rooks, and black will have some difficulties making progress here. Instead, Rubinstein blundered the game with knight h6, since after king g7 he is no longer able to win an extra piece by taking the d7 knight. He tried to mitigate his problem somewhat by playing knight takes f7 here, after the precise queen b3. He actually further blundered, and it's already bad, but d5 as played loses almost another piece. An interesting stockfish suggestion is knight d6, after which black must play precisely to win convincingly. You can take on f1 and follow up with rook d8. Queen e2 here, threatening to fork rook and king, is well met by rook f8, however, intending to meet queen e7 with king h8, and white is distracted on the back rank. After d5, however, black can simply play knight f6, and yeah, what is white to do? He attacking the queen, and Rubinstein has somewhat crumbled. He tried queen d4, but after rook f7, bishop c4, and queen a4, he's down a little bit too much material. He played one more move, and then rather than suffer this very annoying pin, he resigned here.
Now this wraps it up for Alekhine's first win, actually, over Rubinstein. Ultimately, he would beat him 8-4 with only 2 draws, and he would come third in this tournament as